Welcome to the Early Weigh-In Podcast. After a week off, we're back talking fights and breaking down UFC Vegas 37. It's Anthony Smith versus Ryan Spann. There's 15 fights on the books for Saturday night, and what starts an 8-week stretch of UFC events filled with some very nice fights and some very nice pay-per-views. Before we jump into it, as always, do us a quick favor, throw us a like and a sub there to the channel. And real quickly, man, I'll let you go over our betting card last week.
Yeah, our betting card last week, it didn't really pan out how we wanted to. We ended up minus 0.17 units. Thankfully, we added Alex Morono pretty late in the game, and that actually saved us. We put 1 unit on him at minus 120, and he came out and looked good against Awada. He really did. Then the Sergey Spivak bat against Tom Aspinall. Another one where we just felt the line was a little wide, but ultimately Tom Aspinall came out there and looked like a 3-1 favorite.
Yeah, it was funny that we said he could get knocked out in 30 seconds and we'd make the bet all over again, and it happened.
Here it is. Brunson by decision, another at plus 500. Maybe I take it again. We just didn't account for Till's submission defense to be that bad, I guess.
Giving up almost too, you know?
Yeah, he didn't look like he was mentally there that night.
I'm with you, man.
The UFC, yeah, like you said, they're kind of making up for last week only having 9 fights. We have 15 fights on the card. We'll start it off in the, I believe it's the strawweight division.
Flyweight
division with Emily Whitmire, who's 4-4, taking on Hannah 24K Goldy, who's 5-2. Whitmire is somebody who I just think has a bad rap in the UFC, man. She trains out of a good gym at Syndicate MMA, and she's got some really good training partners there with Roxy and JoJo to train for somebody like Hannah Goldy. Honestly, her losses, they don't tell me too much. People sleep on Polyana Viana, but that's my girl, and she's legit. I really think that Emily's going to have the wrestling advantage here over Hannah Goldy. Hannah Goldy has kind of shown that her athleticism and her strength is only going to take her so far. And even though she's moved down a weight class here, I don't think that she has the skills to stop Whitmire's takedown attempts. Hannah Goldy, she's training out of Fusion XL, and she's got some good training partners there, but I don't think it's going to be enough, and ultimately I think she's going to get her 3rd straight UFC loss.
Yeah, man. So, when I first looked at this fight and you look at the opening lines, I thought there might have been a lot of value on Hannah Goldy as a big underdog, but public steamed her down to the point where it's almost making me going to play Whitmire here, you know? You talked about her at a good gym, and you're right. She does just kind of get a bad rep. She's a 4-4, 50-50 fighter. You look at the amateur record, it's 4-4 there as well. So she's kind of pretty much told you, she's never going to reach the top of the division. But, lucky enough, Hannah Goldy is probably never going to reach the top of the division either. You look at some of the girls Emily Whitmire's fought to, and she's lost to some pretty good girls. She beat Emily Dakota in her pro debut. Dakota is the one who just head kicked Daniel Taylor's head into the stands a couple weeks ago. You're right. I think I do favor Whitmire in the wrestling heavily, and even maybe a little bit in the striking. She fights really, really long behind her footwork and her jab. And I, like you said, I always go back to her, the ability to mix in that takedown. And then you look at who she's lost to, but not so much who she's lost to, it's how she's lost to them. And it's 4 straight submission losses, I think, are all 4 of her losses. And when you look at the style Hannah Goldy brings, sure, she's a tank of a woman. She's really strong, and in those grappling exchanges, she could be extremely strong. But, man, she doesn't shoot a takedown. She's got a guillotine on her amateur record. Hannah Goldy does not bring in the style that's, historically given Emily those type of issues. I think the more I even thought about it, I think Emily might be the side to play on Saturday.
I think somebody that we could compare Hannah Goldy to is somebody like Manon Fiorot, just not as athletic and not as gifted whenever it comes to the striking realm. Hannah Goldy is just somebody who, like you said, isn't living up to what you'd see on Instagram. You'd think that she'd be an upper echelon fighter. It just isn't panning out. So I'm with you on kind of leaning Whitmire here, and it might be worth it, especially as that line continues to drop.
Yeah, one thing I won't say about Hannah Goldy is, she's going back up to the flyweight division after being at strawweight. But, I do want to give her a little bit of pass because Granger and Belbita, they're 5'7" girls. They had a 7-inch reach advantage on her. Now she is going to get a girl who's relatively as her size. But, man, I still look at Hannah Goldy's fights and I watch her put her back on the cage the entire time. And there's just not a lot there that makes me think that she's going to threaten Emily. I'm going to lean Emily, more than likely by decision, obviously. But, yeah, I'm going to, I think, be pretty mature just to take her money line on Saturday. Next up in the bantamweight division, we have Gustavo Lopez, who's 12-6, taking on Alateng Heili, who's 14-8-1. Gustavo Lopez, there in Vegas doing a whole lot of the work at Extreme Couture. And he's been a guy that I've always said, you haven't really gotten to see I guess maybe a fair shake or a true representation of what he is. Because in his debut, it's Merab. That's an unwinnable fight. Mm-hmm. The next fight, it's Anthony Burchak. And I was reading multiple rumors. These guys are friends. They trained together hundreds of times in Vegas. And the outcome was kind of already known what was going to happen. And then Adrian Yanez, one of the better prospects the bantamweight division has. Another one where, just levels above what I think Lopez is here. He kind of comes crashing forward with some bad defense and typically what's going to get him caught there. With Alateng, I know a whole lot of people are extremely excited that he's moved to fight ready for this one. Hope to make massive improvements. And last time out was a pretty bad showing, I guess you could say. But, sure, he doesn't have the skills to compete with Casey Kenny, but we all knew that, But, man, he showed some durability. But prior to that, it's a gifted decision against Danab Bajtari and then a split decision over Ryan Benoit, who is a flyweight and just lost to 3-3 Zaruk Adashev, So I'm not running to the window to bet Alateng here by no means, but I do think he is probably the right side. I think he's sharper hands, better wrestler. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Alateng, but I'm not overly eager to bet him by no means, man.
Yeah, I think I understand the reserve on the Alateng side. I mean, he, especially in his last fight, he looked much better as the nail than he ever has as the hammer than he of his previous fights. And I think that's kind of what's working against him. Where you look over at Gustavo Lopez, and he's got a mixed bag of finishes. He's not dependent on one avenue to get his victories. You see him, he has some powerful double legs to get it to the ground. And when he is striking, he's got like some Lineker-esque body shots, and he's smiling when he's doing it. I think he's having fun in there. And like you said, it's kind of tough to gauge where he is, where you look on Alateng and we know that he's better than Batjarel, which is kind of looking better now as Dana just got his last win. But like you said, it's guys that he should be beating. And then Casey Kenny whooped his ass, and we just saw that, Casey Kenny, he can hang with Dominic Cruz, but maybe Casey Kenny isn't the guy that everybody thought he was either. Right. So it does give me reserve to bet Alateng, but I also would agree with you. I give him the edge. Something that I don't like about Alateng is he does have a tendency to back up on a center line and just kind of wait for guys to finish their combos before trying to stop, where Lopez is somebody who will chase you, and he'll continue to throw punches as you move backwards, and that's something that I could see Lopez catching Alateng with. I know Alateng can take some punishment, as we saw in the Kenny fight, but Lopez is definitely if he's able to catch him, I think it'll be Alateng backing up and Lopez kind of coming forward with those reckless combinations like you mentioned earlier.
And it's funny that you bring up that scenario particularly, because I'm a little bit on the other side of it, because I think that Alateng is going to move back and let Gustavo come forward, kind of like what Adrian Yanez did a little bit. Let him throw the first punch, take the step back, and counter him with that same right hand. Because Gustavo doesn't feign his way in very much or anything. He kind of just wings big home run shots and stuff and telegraphs a lot of it. I'm not putting Alateng strike on anywhere the level of Yanez, but I do have a point here that I think he lands that same counter right hand.
And I guess that my only argument to that is Alateng, when he is back, he's not a very good counter striker. Right. As I saw him backing up, he more or less stays on that center line and tries to just wait out a combination. And
when you're eating body kicks, some hands are glued, though.
That's true, but it's not only in the Kenny fight; it's in the other ones. But yes, I agree. It's a tough fight to call, and one that I'm happy that we're kind of laying off with.
Yeah, man, I think probably laying off probably the best situation here as well.
We've got a really exciting matchup at welterweight where we see Impa Kasanganay, who's 9-1, taking on Carlston Harris, who's 16-4. Impa Kasanganay is training out of Sanford MMA, and what you hear about him in the training room, man, he's an absolute workhorse. He's kind of like one of those legends in the training room. And honestly, it's a weird showing for him so far in the UFC. Right. I know coming into the UFC, he was a total, everybody was behind him. Everybody thought that he had all the skills to become a champion one day. And, he gets knocked out by Joaquin Buckley, and the
Stop dead
hype
in
train
the
ends,
tracks.
man. Honestly, I think if he wasn't on the receiving end of that highlight reel KO, we could see him at a minus 250 in this spot against somebody like Carlston Harris, regardless of if it's justified or not. I just think that the bookies would be still on Impa like they were before that Buckley knockout. He's coming off that rear naked choke of Sasha Palatnikov, which it turns out it's kind of easy to do. So I don't know how much that tells you, but it does tell me that him fighting at welterweight is possible. Yeah. He can still perform at that weight, which is what I was kind of concerned about. Right. He was always a small middleweight, but he carried a lot of muscle, so to go down an extra 15 pounds is impressive. And then in the Carlston Harris side, he's training at a RFT fight team with nobody that I've heard of. But he's got a pretty decent resume. You look down at it, and he's beat some UFC caliber guys for sure. And even in his debut against Christian Aguilera, he showed that he's a threat on the mat. And I do think that that's where he poses more of a threat to Impa. When he is standing, he has some long punches, but ultimately I think that Impa's going to kind of edge him out on the feet. If he does get it to the ground, though, he has a nasty Darce choke and those long limbs that can really offer some threats to Impa. That being said, Impa's really given me no reason to question his takedown defense, so as long as this stays standing, I think we'll see Impa jab his way to a decision win here.
So, man, I think I see everybody on Carlston Harris this week, the line, reflecting it. And, yeah, man, I think I'm going to be on the Impa Kasanganay side as well. The move to Sanford, huge for this guy. You talked about how everyone was just hyping him up and stuff about this prime athlete that we got all the potential in the world. And he was training with Brian Barberina at Gym O, so ton of more bodies at Sanford for this guy to just continue to improve. And at one time, you're right, man, just like the hottest prospect on the block and probably a significant favorite here if you minus that freak knockout that he had. Been a lot more patient with his career. He's not fighting every month and stuff now. He's down at 170, being real patient, being mature and intelligent with his career, just like he is in the octagon, man. You don't see a lot of wasted energy. You see us guard tight, no winging punches. What I think is going to be huge here, Impa tears up that lead leg very, very well. Carlston has a wide base. He's got some skinny legs. I think that calf kick of Impa is going to be huge here. Impa's got a gas tank, man, as well. Carlston Harris, nothing screams gas tank issues like a 34-year-old Brazilian who has not been out of the first round since 2019 or something. I will say he's looked great. You talked about him beating guys like Michel Pereira, Wellington Turman. The guy that he gets into the UFC on, he's a 17-1 nasty Russian that Dana's there to see, not to see Carlston Harris. And then as soon as that fight hit the mat against Christian Aguilera, my God, man, like the way he wrapped up that anaconda choke, it was so slick. The way he used his legs to peel off Aguilera's elbows. I mean, very technical, very clinical, and something I love to see. For Impa, the way Carlston Harris tries to take this fight to the mat, he always tries to duck under your shots, and tries to get that body lock, step across, and drag you down. Impa's strong in the clinch, man, and he's won plenty of fights by ragging people out up against the cage in the clinch, So
at 185.
At 185, you're right. So I'm a bit worried that Harris ain't going to have the type of strength that, to get that body lock and get Impa down. But the two fights I want to reference, it is his amateur career, but amateur career for Impa is only in 2018. He does lose to Brian Battle by getting out-wrestled. In his first Contender Series opportunity against Kalen Hill, he gets a couple takedowns landed against him. He's hard to hold down, but he does have the takedowns landed against him. So he's been pretty lucky, getting guys like Buckley, Maki Patolo, Anthony Adams, guys who really aren't that type of wrestler, and where we could see Carlston Harris shoot some takedowns. But yeah, man, I favor Impa here. I really do, man. I'm glad you say all the same side as me. Moving on, we're back in the women's flyweight division where we have Erin Blanchfield, who's 6-1, taking on Sarah Alpar, who's 9-5. With Blanchfield set to make her debut a week back, but up at 35 on short notice, supposed to be taking on Norma Dumont, who, shocker, comes in at 139.5 pounds, and commission pulls the fight there with Blanchfield being a natural flyweight. But she was game, man. She was still willing to take that fight. And that's something what I like to see. She's 22 years old. She's not trying to protect that record. She's trying to get in there with the best of the girls. You look at Kay Hansen, Victoria Leonardo, girls already in the UFC that she's got wins over. A split decision to Tracy Cortez. I mean, that looks pretty good for a girl who's still not in the UFC at this point, On Sarah Alpar, Camp funded by the Paul brothers after the GoFundMe was released, and she trains out at Panda Kickboxing and Jiu-Jitsu, and to me, man, it just looks like very low-level training for, I hate to say it, a very low-level fighter in Sarah Alpar. She's been super inconsistent, fighting like one time a year since 2016, and matter of fact, she's coming down to flyweight after being finished by a flyweight who went up to bantamweight last time, and Jessica Rose Clark. So I get it. It is a wide women's line, and the 6-1 Barry Green Blanchfield is probably not deserving of this minus 300 price tag, but at the same time, Sarah Alpar doesn't do it for me, man, and doesn't really entice me to bet her either.
Yeah, I guess my biggest thing with this fight is to not put Blanchfield in your parlays this week. Like you said, she is a legitimate prospect and will likely roll in this UFC debut right here. But she, like you said, she's 22 years old. She's a huge favorite, and she's the women's MMA right here. I mean, it's all set up for an upset here. And you talk about her win over Kay Hansen. Probably should have been an amateur fight. We're talking about two 18-year-olds scrapping it out, and so I don't know how much that's telling me right there. I think that Blanchfield, her biggest concern would be losing a decision here, and that's just by Alpar getting a takedown and doing a little lay and pray. I really do think that that's possible. But on the feet, I think Blanchfield has the edge here. She's definitely got the better kickboxing skills, where Alpar is pretty limited in her striking. And then on the mat, even if Alpar does get it to the ground, she's not safe because Blanchfield's jiu-jitsu is so legit that there's always an armbar from guard opportunity there in women's MMA. Like I said, just lay off of this with your parlays, but no reason that Alpar should no reason to give you to bet Alpar. Just lay off.
I'm right there with you. Couldn't have said anything better. No reason to bet Alpar, but yeah, man, no reason to put Erin Blanchfield, who's unproven in them parlays on Saturday either.
Right. We move on to an exciting matchup in our bantamweight division where we see Montel Jackson, who's 10-2, taking on JP Bays, who's 9-3. Montel Jackson, I think he trains at a Pura Vida BJJ, but if you go onto his Instagram, you couldn't tell. Honestly, I'm a little concerned with his priorities coming into this matchup. I don't know how seriously he takes his fighting career, if I'm being honest. I know he's had a really tough run in the UFC, only really dropping losses to legitimate guys in Ricky Simone and Brett Johns. And he has rattled off some legitimate wins in that in his UFC tenure as well. Brian Kelleher being the most notable one, where he locked up a submission. And, I do think that he's one of these guys that really relies on his speed and athleticism. And to be fair, I think that JP Bays is one of those guys that's going to fall victim to Montel Jackson's speed and athleticism. You don't need much to beat Bays. You look down on his record, and honestly, the Bruno Silva loss, the fact that JP Bays came in as a favorite is almost laughable in hindsight, and thankfully we were on the Bruno Silva side, so that's awesome. But you look down his record, and his best win is over a 6-3 Jacob Silva, who's now sitting at a 7-6 record. I mean, it's really, really bad. And JP Bays is gonna need to utilize his wrestling to get this fight to win rounds against Jackson, but I don't think that he'll even get within 8.5 inches that Montel Jackson has on him. So I think it'll be a quick night for Montel Jackson. Got first round TKO plus 325.
For me, yeah, man. Montel's side as well. Little bit confused as to why the UFC did him the way they did. He's 6-0, something like that, coming off Contender Series. Bunch of finishes, young, all the reach, athleticism you could want, and you feed him to Ricky Simone right out the gates. He's undefeated. Why don't you give him the O'Malley approach and stuff and build this guy up slow? Because, could be a problem if he takes it serious outside the cage. He's a pretty good wrestler, got a really slick submission game, and he knows how to use that reach really well. In the Strader fight, every time they break out of the pocket, he caught Strader with the right hand multiple times. Strader couldn't reach him, he had no answer for it. But what makes me just, I guess, a little hesitant is what you brought up. Who's he lose to? Wrestlers. Ricky Simone, Brett Johns, National Wells team. On the side of JP Bays, South African wrestling team. And I know he's coming up a weight class and moving camps now back to Extreme Couture, and coming off that TKO loss to Bruno Silva, I will be the first to say it is not a smart career move for him whatsoever. But he does have the wrestling that's historically been the problem that's Montel's had in the past. you brought up a good point about Jacob Silva, and that's something that I wanted to touch. That's the best JP we've ever seen. And if the best JP we've ever seen is beating a guy who's 7-6, all on the regional scene, I don't expect him to really compete with Montel Jackson here. You mentioned it slightly. Manage some takedowns late, try to exhaust Montel, and squeak out some decision victory here. But personally, I don't like this matchup for him. I don't understand him taking it. I know his wife looked super good after switching back to Extreme Couture, but I think JP is way over his head here. The price on Montel, it's nothing new. You got to pay for Montel every single time. Montel gets this done inside the distance, man.
It's a lose-lose situation for Bays. You see Jackson, and he's lost to 2 wrestlers, but they're much better than Bays. Sure. And then Bays, although it's a different animal in Bruno Silva, this Montel Jackson, it's another awful matchup for him. And I don't think that his UFC career is going to go very well. He might have one more fight in him before they cut him, but I don't think that wife-husband duo is going to work out like they wanted.
We talked about Darren Till last week only throwing stuff from his left side. Mm-hmm. JP you only see throwing a right hand and a right head kick, only from the right side. And when he does load up on that right hand, he drops the left, similar to Cody Garbrandt. And you saw someone like Bruno Silva beat this guy to the punch multiple times, put him on his butt multiple times. Don't expect anything different from Montel. I probably won't take the first round. I'm more looking at Montel inside the distance, -175, even if I got to pay a little bit. Montel finishes this guy on Saturday. Mm-hmm. Next up in the lightweight division, we see Nikolas Motta, who's 12-3, taking on Cameron VanCamp, who's 15-5-1. A little bit of a short notice replacement for Nikolas Motta, who was supposed to take on Jim Miller here. Nikolas Motta is a Factory X Muay Thai. He's got the 5-round experience in the Apex before as well. Really much like, just kind of like a counter boxer, and that's pretty much all he is here with VanCamp. Short notice. I didn't really do my due diligence, I guess, on the tape study for Cameron VanCamp, but looking through it, it looks like he tries to get the fight to the mat. We'll look for some submissions, but I expected him to come as a big underdog here, so going to side with Nikolas Motta. If I had to pick, say second round TKO.
Yes, I'll agree with you. I guess I got Motta here, but it's really not a lot coming from my knowledge on VanCamp. Like you said, it's short notice, and I do know that this is somewhere where he's likely going to miss this. I'm pretty sure that he hasn't cut to 155 since his no contest loss to Thomas Gifford. And to take this on like a week's notice, I don't think he's going to do it. He's 6'1" and a bigger guy for the division. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, we might get some value on VanCamp just because I'm almost positive he's going to come in missing weight here. Mm-hmm. But outside of that, Motta, like you said, he's training out of a good gym in Factory X Muay Thai. He only fights about once a year, which is a little concerning. And ultimately, this is going to be one I lay off of.
Yeah, I'm laying off of it as well. With VanCamp, something I took note as well is him being a next welterweight and just fighting back in like July. A lot of guys like to, indulge in some sweets and stuff after they're fighting. And so I expect this guy to be cutting from somewhere around 190 pounds, probably making 155. Don't see it going very well. I like the fact that you saw that he might be missing weight too, and I think that's why I'm leaning with the second round TKO. I think he's going to have about one round of gas tank in him, come hard. Motta's going to have to take that round one, maybe fight off a little bit, get those reads, probably get a second round TKO.
Nice. We got a great matchup in the lightweight division where we see Dakota Bush, who's 8-3, taking on Rong Zhu, who's 17-4. Dakota Bush, he's training out of Glory MMA with James Krause. I know everybody likes to hear that. That's always something that you want to have behind you as a fighter. You look down his record, he's kind of struggled in the past when he's fought wrestlers. We saw that in the Jaleel Willis fight whenever he was in LFA. And honestly, anytime that he stepped up in his career, he's kind of fallen short. He's got some decent leg kicks, but his cardio is an issue from what I can tell in the tape. He does kind of have a drop-off point at a moment in his fights. Rong Zhu, they say he's been fighting since he was a little kid. And they also say that he's 21 years old, but he looks 8 years older than me. He trains at American Top Team now. And I do like that. He's one of those guys who just didn't really pan out for the China Top Team push that the UFC really gave. He's coming off that loss to Vargas where he was a pretty heavy favorite. Right. And I don't really know what to tell you about Rong, nothing about him makes me want to bet him here. He was able to land a couple of takedowns in that Vargas fight, but they were out of desperation,
Right.
you know? So I think I'm going to lean wrong here, but just because I think that you're going to lean Bush, and maybe it can be a little bit of a difference, you know?
Yeah, man, this one, it's a tough one for me to call here. With Bush, you talked about the time he spent in LFA and the 2 losses that he has being to some good wrestlers, and both of those guys scooped up and now fighting for Bellator. So not losing to horrible competition. It's training, like you talked about, starting to get a whole lot better, being Westside MMA, working with Bryce Mitchell and TJ Brown, and now at Glory MMA. Yeah, the cardio, the volume, it takes a big dip after round 1 because he just throws so much into all of his shots, into the jab, into his left hook, his leg kicks. He puts a lot into those, and it's detrimental to the gas tank. And last time against Austin Hubbard, I almost want to give him a pass. You know, it's short notice for him. You know, he probably knew he didn't have much but a 1-round gas tank probably in there. But at the same time, if you know anybody that you have to pace yourself on, it's Austin Hubbard. That's not somebody that you can go out there and have 1 round in because he's got 10 rounds in his gas tank.
Right.
What I like about Dakota, though, is that calf kick. I think the calf kick is going to be huge on that wide stance that, you know, that Rong has. And I think Dakota's going to have a little bit of the wrestling chops here as well. But with Rong, the UFC PI over there in Shanghai just nonstop hyping this guy up. Super experienced for his age. And he's a very, very talented striker. I like watching him strike, man. He's got a really good jab, and he'll double it up and hide that right hand behind it. Very, very smooth. Finished 16 of his 17 wins, and he's only needed the scorecards twice in all 21 fights, which is pretty crazy. My kind of knock on him, he's a counter puncher, you know. He likes to sit back. He's not going to throw the volume. He's going to let you walk to him, and you kind of saw that that's the reason why he lost in Vargas's fight. Vargas is someone who usually is one that looked for the takedowns in his fight, and he straight up beat Rong without having to land a single one of his takedowns. He just got ahead of him on strikes, and that's all you really needed to do. But with Rong, you know, that night, Chinese fighters went, 0-4?
I think so, right?
You're right. First time back in front of a massive crowd that was just going crazy. You know, you hear Wei Li's excuses and stuff about the crowd, so you know, you almost want to give the 21-year-old a pass for his debut and stuff like that, and expect a better showing this time around. And historically, you know, this guy's lost, 3 times prior to the UFC by submission, and then 1 time in round 2 was deep in a Vargas guillotine. Dakota Bush needs to wrestle, I think, if he wants to have success. If he's out at range, man, I think Rong might be the better striker of the two, man.
So here's one thing that I gotta knock on Bush for. You know, you talk about the Hubbard win, and maybe him not getting finished by Hubbard is possibly the best showing that he's had in his career. He got 30-27 by Hubbard, and you look down his record, his best win might be his win coming into the UFC against Austin Clem, who's 4-1. Yeah. Realistically, he, like I said, every time he stepped up, even the slightest, against guys like Bryce Logan or Jaleel Williams, which, you know, yes, they're in Bellator, but they might not touch UFC. You know, he hasn't won. Where you go on to Rong Zhu's side, and Shay Lin, the guy who was 17-5, I won't even try and say his last name. He has at least fought in the UFC. Now he did lose to Josh Kulabau, which is pretty bad, but at least Rong did perform against a UFC caliber guy. That's enough for me to lean him in this pick'em situation right here.
I think I'm with you. I think if I had to pick somebody, I'm probably going to pick Rong Zhu as well. But I don't know if I'm overly eager to bet him either, you know. We're in our women's bantamweight division next, where we see Pannie Kianzad, who's 15-5, taking on Raquel Pennington, who's 11-8. And with Pannie, you know, she had kind of 2 first showings for the UFC on Ultimate Fighter, where she came up short in the finale to Macy Chiasson at 145. And then she debuts on short notice against Julia Avila. But since she's, you know, been at her proper weight class of 135 and on a full camp, she's now pieced together 4 in a row and looked really good. Her boxing's sharp. She has a very clean left hook, which is probably her best weapon. And she's got really, really good volume. You look at her volume, 98 significant strikes against Jessica Rose Clark, 103 landed against Betch, 92 against Sarge, where she spent 4 minutes of the first round on her back, and then 124 in the Alexis Davis fight. So it's a hard girl to keep up with the volume. We're on the side of Raquel. You know, she's coming off a win over Marion Renault, which is probably the easiest fight this girl has been given to date. Just I guess you can call her maybe a journeyman of the division, but she's without a doubt a test that girls have to pass if you want to get to that upper echelon of the division. She's been a world title challenger before, didn't go too well against Amanda Nunes. She basically quits on herself, and what do? They reward her with the fight with Jermaine Durandamain. She loses that one. What do you get? Who do you get next? You get Irene Aldana. And she wins that one.
Squeaks it out.
But who do you get next? Fucking Holly Holm. It's the best of the division, and it's talent Pannie has not seen yet. And how do you beat Pannie? You do what Sarge does. You put her on her back in round 1. You put her up against the cage, and man, if that is not how Raquel fights, I don't know how she fights. So I think you're on the same boat. Raquel Pennington's the side on Saturday.
I think Raquel is the side, man. It's weird to say, but like you said, she's only 33 years old, and she has seen the far better competition here. And like you said, I think that she's going to be the much physically stronger fighter, and she's going to be able to grind her up against the cage for all 15 minutes. Something I do kind of worry about is I don't think that Raquel's going to be getting the takedown as easy as some people might think. Pannie does have a decent takedown defense at 78%, but she does show, lapses in takedown defense because she gets taken down by just about every opponent she has, but she does have a decent get-up game, so that's something to her credit. I think if it does stay at range, that Pannie might piece her up because she is the better, faster striker in my opinion. I just don't think that Raquel's going to give her that opportunity. She might wet blanket her for 15 minutes, and it's not going to be a super exciting fight. But I think that this one's set up for Raquel Pennington. She's, like I said, the much stronger fighter here. Press her up against the cage and just win a decision for us.
With Raquel, I think she has better wrestling than Alexis Davis and Betch Correa and Jessica Rose Clark for sure. So the best comparison, I think, is Sajara Eubanks. She's got the no-gi championships, things like that. Sarge gets that takedown 30 seconds in, and Pannie has no answer to get off her back the entire round 1. I really think if Raquel gets this fight to the mat, I think it stays there, to be honest with you. I do think it hits decision. Women's bantamweights historically go to decision more than any other weight class. Odds are this one does too, but man, I swear I will not be shocked if she works her way to the back and finds a rear naked choke on Pannie. I think there's a clear discrepancy on these two girls on the mat. These two girls clinch, their strength, their experience. I agree with the public money coming on Raquel, and maybe should have hit her a little earlier.
The UFC's given us some big boys in the prelim main event where we see Tafon Nchukwi, who's 5-1, taking on Mike Rodriguez, who's 11-6. And Nchukwi is moving up to 205 since taking his first 2 fights at middleweight. And he kind of had mixed success. In his first fight with Jamie Pickett, he had great output and really just kind of rolled over Pickett. And then in his last fight against Jun Young Park, looked awful, man. Yeah. Honestly, after that fight, I was thinking immediate fade in his next fight no matter what. He just had this huge cardio dump, which we've kind of seen over his career. And I think that that's something that, we could see in this fight again. He's, like I said, he's moving up a weight class, and it's against somebody in Mike Rodriguez who's 6'4" with an 82-inch reach. It's a big boy. That being said, Mike Rodriguez, not a lot that makes me, want to back him.
Slow Mike for a reason.
Right. Although this is what our casual cap is on this week. We have decided that this is a fight where we disagree slightly, and it's close enough to where we like it for the casual cap. Mike Rodriguez, he's a southpaw, and he wants to counter fighters that are coming into him. He's really, really bad off of his back, so hopefully it doesn't end up there. But I know that he's going to want to sit back and try and utilize that 5-inch reach advantage and the 4-inch height advantage. And, he might get somebody in Nchukwi who's a little bit timid going up that weight class. If Nchukwi wins, I think his best chances are in the first round, probably by knockout. But if Rodriguez can get past that first round, hopefully we can see Nchukwi big cardio dump and Rodriguez pull out a decision, I guess.
Yeah, I hope not. I'm going to go with Tafon, man. But yeah, it is not just like one of my strongest lean of the night by no means. Tafon is out of Team Lloyd Irvin. If just looking at him, looking at Sadiq Yusuf, great shape there. This guy's making their guys work. They have great takedown defense, hard to hold down. But you're right. The cardio did take a dump the last time, and I think that just cut with that muscle to 85 is just way too much for him, and probably why we see him go back up to 205 here. What I do like about Tafon, though, is he doesn't look for the home run shot. He's happy to throw in combination. He ends them well with the high kick. And in that Pickett fight, maybe it was just an anomaly, man, but he's throwing 234 strikes with, his most output in round 3. So sometimes, man, he does come in with a decent gas tank for a big boy. One thing I like here is I think he's going to be able to chew that lead leg up of Mike really, really well, limit that lateral movement, keep Mike in front of him. And Mike always likes to initiate that clinch. I know he's going to be the bigger person, but I think I favor Tafon in that clinch. He's got really good knees and elbows, and he's got really good trips to where he might be able to get Mike down a little bit and lay on him. He's still very green. He's 5-1. Mike's got all, double the experience. But you look at how Tafon's lost and to Park, and by taking him down, Mike's not shot a takedown his entire UFC career. He's a pretty decent striker himself. He pretty much covered all that. But I also want to, give him some props too, because the last time he lost, the last two, props to Ed Herman for the vet move. But, he kind of a little bit of bad fight IQ on his behalf once that fight got restarted. But he lost via grappling, And in the next fight, Danilo Marquez, a guy that probably shouldn't be in the UFC, a guy that Mike really had potential to look like a bigger than minus 250 favorite. Danilo has no striking in a single leg, and what do you know? He takes Mike down and he submits him. But again, it's the grappling that causes Mike the issues, and Tafon's not going to be grappling. He's not going to be going for the Kimura, not going to be going for the rear naked choke. I think both these guys 100% want to keep this fight standing on the feet, and that's where I kind of got to ask myself, who do I ever so slightly lean if this stays standing? And that's where I've come to the conclusion, maybe 55% of the time I'm leaning toward Nchukwi. So, like I said, not even a strong lean, but if we got to find one, a fun one that we disagree on, yeah, I'm going to side with Tafon.
And my argument, I guess, for the stand-up of Mike Rodriguez is we have seen glimpses in his career against Prachniow and Milstead where he shows, signs where he utilizes all of his length. He shows that he is powerful. And, it's just one of those things where he's got all the physical advantages. And if it's low level, I'm going to lean on the side of the guy who has those advantages.
Yeah, and I don't blame you with Tafon coming up a weight class. I know he's fought there before. But yeah, Mike's been the typical light heavyweight and losing 3 of his last 4, needs to get back on track. So I know the back's up against the wall and I expect a good performance. But
probably fighting for pink slips.
For sure. Absolutely. But yeah, I'm just going to lean the other side ever so slightly. Kicking off our main card, we're in the middleweight division where we see Joaquin Buckley, who is 12-4, taking on Antonio Arroyo, who is 9-4. And, with Buckley, dude is just an absolute physical specimen, And when he was on the pay-per-view in the embedded, his nutritionist talks about he is one of the easiest guys to help cut weight because he's just a workhorse all the time, always monitoring his diet himself. But you listen to James Krause talk about him, and he seems to be a little bit of a dickhead, maybe, Seems to be hard to get along with, hard to train with, and every time I feel like I break down his fights, he's training somewhere different, and it doesn't always seem to be the highest level of training either.
You see him now at Raven Ridge MMA.
He was coming off, before his last one, he got 250K performance of the night bonuses, one of them, the most highlight reel knockout of all time, and then another one against Jordan Wright that was very impressive. Life got a little bit sweeter for Joaquin, Next time out against Alessio Di Chirico, dude got a slice of humble pie right out the gates, didn't he? But Antonio Arroyo, Jackson Week MMA, great size. He likes to throw those kicks, man, and that's something that I think is extremely relevant in this fight, being that Buckley just got TKO'd by a head kick. But Arroyo, his UFC showing, I guess could say, is just not off to the start that he wanted to. The last time out was one of the more embarrassing losses to date that I can think of. The guy has every physical advantage in the world that he could want and still drops the ball. He doesn't have a gas tank. He cannot seem to keep the fight where he wants it on the feet. But, man, I don't know if Buckley's going to be shooting a takedown on Saturday. And if this fight is still left standing, I think Buckley is striking with, someone that is not a plus 185 dog, And so I see a little bit of value on Arroyo, but I haven't quite pulled the trigger yet. How do you see it?
Yeah, so the line is wide on Arroyo for sure. But he has shown us nothing to want to back him. Yeah. So I'm with you. And to be honest with you, I was on that win side against Hoyo.
I know you are.
And one thing to note about that I do think is going to be a factor is that fight was up at 195 pounds. We're talking about a big middleweight here in Arroyo. And Joaquin Buckley is another one of those guys who my biggest concern with Joaquin is that he's in a weight class that he shouldn't be in.
182s on the scales.
Right. I think that he's one of these guys, especially if he's at this weight class, he's going to stick in that top 15 to 25. And yeah, he might, with his power and volume and that kind of like mini Mike Tyson-esque striking, he's going to get these highlight reel KOs. And the UFC is going to be more than happy with keeping him around. But he's also going to eventually turn into a stepping stone for a lot of guys. And although Antonio Arroyo is already 32 years old and honestly, the best years of his career have probably passed him by to really start to progress in the UFC. But Buckley will be a walking stone eventually, and Arroyo just hasn't shown what I think he's capable of. And if you just give him the eye test, man, he looks like Luke Rockhold, man. You'd think that he's going to get his highlight reel KO eventually. And like you said, Buckley took the time off that he should after a KO loss to DeChirico. But we're talking about another kicker here. We're talking about somebody who's going to be throwing some tough high kicks as Buckley's weaving in and out, trying to close that distance. We could see another KO here. I don't know from which side, but I'm with you on Arroyo being a decent dog at plus 180, or at least Buckley not being a justifiable minus 200.
Right, and you know, like I want to reiterate the 2 losses in the UFC due to the grappling deficiencies, 2 submission losses prior to the UFC. That is not historically how Buckley fights one freaking bit. Where you see Antonio Arroyo is going to shine, he is going to throw so many kicks that are going to keep Buckley's hands glued to him. He's going to be able to switch between the body and go up high, similar to like the Giga Jamie Simmons type thing. And I want to note something here. Buckley opens up a bigger favorite here than Jordan Wright. I just don't agree with it, man. And the more I think about it, the more I might dabble on Antonio, before Saturday.
Yeah, I hear you. Hopefully we can lay off of it the pod. If we keep on talking about it, I'm with you. We might have to take a stab at it. Our next fight takes place in the bantamweight division, where we see Nate Maness, who's 13-1, taking on Tony Gravely, who's 21-6. Maness, he's coming out of Tag MMA. Not really the best training partners to work with, man. And you look down his record, and these past 2 wins, he has squeaked by, man. Squeaked by. And I know we actually bet him against Luke Saunders, but Saunders made it sketchy in that first round, you know? Maness, he's shown a submission-heavy takedown defense, but also a problem with his takedown defense. He is subject to get taken down. And you look on Gravely, he's somebody who will spam takedowns, the double leg especially. He's training out of American Top Team, and I know that he spent a lot of the time in Atlanta, but has since moved down to Florida. And I'm actually excited to see what comes out of that. We snagged Gravely at minus 165, and we've seen that line kind of move up to around the minus 200 range. Honestly, my only concern about this fight is if Maness is able to continue to get to his feet, Gravely could gas in round three. If he can't get if he has to continue to work for that takedown. But stylistically, I think that this is a really easy W for Gravely. And I wish I could knock on wood right now. It's not an easy W, but I do think outside of a mental slip up of Gravely, maybe inside of Maness's guard, because Maness does have good BJJ, and I imagine that Maness will be on his back quite a bit. I think Gravely will roll here, man.
I'm with you, man. On the Gravely side, you talked about just much, much better training. Being at American Top Team now, when you look online, looking at Nate Maness, he's got the damn Bush Light flag in the background, I know we're from old White House, Tennessee, but he looks like he's training even more country than we have before. And it's not just the current training now, where I talked about him bringing in guys from like Kentucky Wesleyan, like a very, very small college that I have a family member that went to. Tony Gravely, man, he's a Division I wrestler from Appalachian State. He had 2 NCAA tournament appearances, a conference championship, was a wrestling coach at Virginia Tech. It is different level of training, different level of wrestling that Tony Gravely's going to bring into it. And then I just want you to look at who Gravely's lost to. The first loss of his career, Pat Sabatini, another D1 college wrestler in legit black belt. You saw what he just did to Jamal Emmer's leg when they hit the mat a couple weeks ago. Next one, Ricky Bandejas. Probably the worst loss, but still had moments in Bellator and fights good competition there. Merab. Who can negate the wrestling of Gravely more than Merab Dvalishvili, And then Manny Bermudez, Brett Johns. Still good wrestlers, but phenomenal submission artists, you know, and I just don't think that Nate Maness is really on the level of those two. I think we see a whole lot of takedowns, a whole lot of riding time, and even if it does get a little sketch round 3, I expect Tony Gravely to have already banked 2 rounds of time. Looking at Nate Maness, you're right. He's 2-0 in the UFC, but squeaking might be an understatement, you know. The Munoz fight, he wins it solely on the basis that Munoz gets points deducted for the groin shots, you know. At one point, Maness is saved by the bell, and even when he gets back to his feet, he's just put on the cage and held there, and he can't get off. The Luke Sanders fight, he loses round 1 on every single scorecard. He's almost dropped, and Luke Sanders, you know, just the most piss-poor fight IQ of any fighter that I can almost think of comes to mind. Gasses and drops the ball, no shocker there. But still, to show that he is losing rounds to someone like Luke Saunders, and I think Tony Gravely is a very, very good pick here, and stylistically could even look like more of a minus 165 favorite.
And to be honest with you, I think it sounds weird, but I think Maness's record plays a part in this line right here. You know, you look at Gravely, and I know he's lost 6 times, but you went down the record. It's to the most legitimate competition that you could ask for. And as we've seen Gravely progress in his career, his striking has followed with his progression, you know? So honestly, with what we've seen from Maness and him getting touched up on the feet, even though that's kind of his realm, we could see Gravely not be, you know, a fish out of water if this does stay on the feet for a little bit longer than he would like.
And that level of wrestling is only going to help your striking. You know, Maness is going to be looking for that level change all night. Yeah, Tony Gravely's aside, man.
Yeah,
for sure.
I totally agree.
Next up, we're in the lightweight division where we see Arman Tsarukyan, who's 16-2, taking on Cristos Giagos, who's 19-8. With Arman, one of the probably hands down one of the better prospects that the UFC's got their hands on right now. You look at the amazing win streak he was on, just to kind of be ended by Islam Makhachev in a debut, but I mean, he gave a damn good account of himself, and officially on record, I think he's the only one has landed a takedown against Islam. Arman has moved to American Top Team for this one, and he is working what looks like a whole lot with Mike Brown, head coach Mike Brown. Not just anybody at American Top Team works with Mike Brown. You don't get Mike Brown unless you're Joanna, unless you're Dustin Poirier, unless you're Jorge Masvidal. They see talent in Arman just like everybody else does. This guy can mix it up very well, nasty Muay Thai, and very good on the mat. Giagos, I mean, all I've got to say is just props to the man, because it seemed like no lightweight on the roster wanted this fight. And looking at the record, though, Giagos taking debuts against the Bronx, Burns, fighting Emmett. He's always been game to fight anybody, so it doesn't shock me that Giagos took this fight. I have a little bit of love for Giagos after the last fight, because he lined my pockets pretty well with that plus 1,000 sub prop, something that I was just all over all week. And again, you know, I got to put that aside, though, in this matchup, because I think he's going to be severely outclassed just about everywhere. We saw Soriano having some success round 1 on the feet against Giagos. He tends to not have the best striking defense. And Arman is a damn good striker. And Arman is a damn good grappler. Arman probably takes this one 30-27.
Right, I was about to say, yeah, Giagos, he did have problems on the feet against Soriano. And then in that third round in the minus fight, it became super sketchy, man. So even cardio issues, his stand-up's not all the way there. And really, when you look down in Giagos' record, his success is often whenever he can utilize his offensive wrestling, and that's not going to be the case here. You know, it's like you said, it's funny how your stock goes up on a loss, but that's exactly what happened with Tsarukyan there. And he's even proven, you know, in the past when Tsarukyan fights legitimate grapplers like Davi Ramos, he still rolls, man, you know? So it's like, I don't know, unless you are somebody like Islam, I think Tsarukyan will actually be an issue for anybody in that top 10 light heavyweight.
Lightweight.
I'm sorry, lightweight. And Tsarukyan, he'll chain together those wrestling attempts, and ultimately I think Giagos only has about a round and a half, 2 rounds to defend it until he'll succumb to the pressure.
Yeah, man, Arman, massive favorite. Pretty sure he's the biggest favorite on the card. I know him and Montel might be battling for that, but Arman, way more deserving of that, and I feel like he has shown that he is going to be a problem. At 24 years old, a name we're probably going to hear for quite some time.
I'll say this one thing, and it's just kind of funny. Islam, you know how he got caught in that one fight. I forget who it was against. Anyway, Islam Makhachev got caught, and he's kind of Tsarukyan's in a position that Islam was in that fight.
Yeah.
And Giagos is the type of guy who does throw heavy strikes and tries to have fight-ending power. So as far as I'm concerned, maybe if you can get that minus 650 on Arman in a parlay, it's justifiable. But when you see these minus 800s, minus 900s against guys that aren't champions, that don't have enough UFC history or tape to back up those type of numbers, I really suggest laying off, because long term I think you'll have enough pie shitters to not justify a minus 650 or above on somebody who only has a few fights in the UFC.
Yeah, man, I couldn't have said it better myself. I think you touched on Giagos' approach here lately. In his last 5 fights, he's landed 21 takedowns, so it's no shocker what this guy's game plan has been coming into these fights, and a game plan I don't see working out very well against Arman.
We move on to the women's flyweight division, where we see the debut of Mandy Bohm, who's 7-0, taking on the Queen of Violence, Ariane Lipski, who's 13-7. Mandy Bohm, she's training out of a gym called MMA Spirit. Haven't heard much about him, but she does hold an undefeated record. And it's not to the best of competition, but as we've seen in Bellator and in UFC, she's been scheduled to fight girls like Liz Carmouche and Talia Santos. So I think that people know that she is a legitimate prospect here. I think whenever I look at this fight, this is not one that I want to try and back Bohm here, mostly because we haven't had enough information on her to really have like a really strong stance on this. You look at Ariane Lipski, she's coming out of American Top Team, and honestly I'm assuming that the only reason why this fight's on the main card is because of Lipski's looks. Because it's definitely not because of her UFC performances. All of her success comes from ground and pound inside the guard or catching a submission in a scramble, but she's honestly very limited in the way that she can implement her offense, and even in the grappling realm of Ariane Lipski, she can still get outclassed by girls like Antonina Shevchenko. So honestly, I think I'm going to lay away from this fight and see what we can take away from Bohm after her debut. Yeah,
with Lipski, you just look through that record there on Tapology. You see a knee bar over Luana Carolina, and you're like, oh, this girl's a stud on the mat. Just go back one more fight before that and watch her get ground and pounded by Antonina Shevchenko. And one does not get backed by my hard-earned money after that, right. But I will say this girl's fought at a much, much higher level than we've seen Mandy Bohm fight. Joanne Calderwood there, Antonina Shevchenko, De La Rosa,
Molly McCann,
and even before that, look at her at KSW. She finished Belbita. She finished Mariano Rivera, a girl who's fighting Kayla Harrison over in PFL. Just went to a split with the girl I know we bet and Taylor Gradardo last time out. She finished Sheila Gaff, who winless in the UFC. She went 0-2, but she fought Amanda Nunes and Olympic wrestler Sarah McMahon. So she has fought experienced girls. She's finished some experienced girls, and that is experience Mandy has not seen yet. She's on the Germinal regional scene, like you said, undefeated, but fighting pretty low-level competition. The best one being that one in Bellator against Great Eckhart, I think's her name. She's 5-3, and she's 4 inches shorter, 4 inches less in reach than Mandy Bohm. So Mandy's had a lot of stylistic advantages in a lot of her fights. She likes to go to the clinch a whole lot, to use the knees and use elbows. That's where Lipski likes to go to a whole lot as well, and I think I favor Lipski there a little bit. And historically, Mandy Bohm has not shown the wrestling. Not that it needs to be on a high level, but she has not shown me the wrestling that I think is going to cause Lipski some problems. She has the round 3 rear naked choke over Jade Wong 2 fights ago, but round 1 and round 2 end with Wong on top of Mandy Bohm. So I'm just not personally sold on her yet. I don't like backing Lipski, don't get me wrong, but to get her at almost a pick'em when I think she's way more proven of a fighter and is the better and where I think this fight's going to take place, I don't hate it if people bet her, but again, some of the performance she has, she's not getting my money.
And to be honest with you, she's 2-4 in the UFC. This could be her pink snake fight as well, I think with Mandy Bohm, when I watched her tape, something that I did like is she does have a pretty deadly jab. And although Lipski likes to say, she's the queen of violence, she has this Muay Thai background, she doesn't have much success on the feet. And I think closing that distance, she could have some issues as long as Bohm keeps that jab out there. But like I said, I think from tape and from the girls that Bohm's fought, she might have the edge on both the feet and on the mat. But this is women's MMA, and I'll say it every single time, that armbar from guard, some type of scramble situation could happen. Yes, pass.
Our co-main event of the evening is in the light heavyweight division, where we see Ion Cutelaba, who's 15-6-1, taking on Devin Clark, who's 12-5. With Cutelaba, he is downright one of the more entertaining fighters that we've got on the roster. You know, from the mental warfare at the face-offs to security needed at his intros. Real fun guy and very entertaining one to watch. And he's fought some relatively tough competition. You know, I guess that excitement factor. It's almost like Mike Perry. It doesn't matter if you can, you know, match up skill for skill with these guys. It's just fun fights, and the UFC is going to put you in them. He does nothing technical, man. He swings everything so big and does nothing with reserve to the gas tank. But I will say, he looks a lot leaner and a lot better. I guess you could say, I wouldn't say better shape this time around because he always looks good, but he looks a whole lot leaner. But I still don't want to bank on that cardio being good of Ion Cutelaba. Where Devin Clark, out of Jackson Weeks MMA, and he's trying to bounce back from what was a pretty bad performance, I guess you could say, his last time out against Anthony Smith.
Let us down, at least.
Let us down. But, you know, he had a lot going on that week. I kind of went back and watched it. He lost a family member leading up to that. It was originally supposed to be Blades versus Lewis as the main event, and he's pushed into it from a co-main to a main event 5 rounds with a family member dying all in like a 4-day span. I just got a feeling his head probably just wasn't screwed on straight going into that fight, you know? And then you look at who he's lost to. How do you gain momentum when you're fighting a top 10 guy every other fight, basically? The Alex Nicholson one, it's his debut. It sucks, but okay, pass. 2 fights, a fight later, you fight the champ, Jan Blachowicz. A fight or 2 later, you have to fight Rakic. And then a fight or 2 later, you're taking on both of these guys in the co-main event. It's going to be hard for anybody to gain some steam like that. So Devin Clark, he is tested, and he has never really been out-wrestled in his fights, which is kind of the, you know, style Ion's going to bring into here. So, again, like I told you earlier, I was on Ion pretty heavy going into it. After tape study, man, I played off Ion.
So I don't know exactly where I stand on it right now still, but I haven't made a huge lean yet. I guess the biggest question to me is Clark big enough to hold somebody like Cutelaba down? You know, on paper, I get that both of these guys kind of match up size-wise, but Devin Clark is a true middleweight, and I'll hold to that. Yeah. He's a little bit of a bloated middleweight, and you know, he really does rely on that wrestling to implement his game plan. There's a fight that I really like to draw from in Devin Clark's past, and that's the Alonzo Minifield fight. I think it's very similar, especially where Alonzo Minifield was in his career at that point in time. He was a 1-round or bust type of fighter, and he hit Devin Clark with some fucking good shots.
Swelled up that eye.
Yeah, and Devin Clark was able to fight through it and stick to his game plan and ultimately, you know, wear on him and get that dub. And that's something that, you know, we've seen Ion Cutelaba even, you know, I know that you talked about the Instagram and him looking good, but even in his last fight, it's a first rounder bust.
You can't bank on unknowns, man.
Right. So it's impossible for me to want to lay favorite odds on Cutelaba here. And, you know, like I said, he does have an incredible get-up game, but I'd be curious to see if Cutelaba tries to utilize any of his own offensive wrestling. I know that sounds kind of weird, but he was able to land 8 in the first round in Dustin Jacoby. It's just that Dustin Jacoby made him work. And I think Devin Clark's one of those guys where if he did end up on his back, he might be a fish out of water. Yeah. So it's one of those ones. I think that first round, it's going to be insanity. But outside of that first round, I think we'll see Clark slowly start to pick up the pace and edge out Cutelaba as the fight goes on.
So if you're planning to bet Clark, probably get a much better price tag live, right?
Right, and probably by decision at that. And then on top of that, if I'm betting Cutelaba, I'm probably going round 1, man. And I hate to make him to like boil it down to just that, but like you said, how are we going to bank on anything than what we've seen and what we've seen in a kind of a lengthy UFC career?
We've seen 1 win in outside the first round in 22 fights with Cutelaba.
How are you supposed to think anything differently?
Yeah, so I'm with you. I think we pretty much come to the conclusion of staying off Ion Cutelaba on Saturday.
We move on to the main event of the night that takes place in the light heavyweight division, where we see Anthony Lionheart Smith, who's 35-16, taking on Ryan Superman Spann, who's 19-6. Anthony Smith is one of those fighters that I personally cannot cap, man. Yeah. The last 2 times he's been out, I've been unsuccessful. He's inconsistent, But man, he really he's only lost to the best of the best, and it's tough to knock him on his losses. You look at all of his wins, and he's a fucking finisher, man. Yeah. All but 2 of his 35 wins are by finish, and I think that'll definitely happen if he can get outside of the first round here. I think Spann's best shot is that first round where he still has a good gas tank and could try and touch up Anthony Smith. You look down Anthony Smith's career, and he does really bad habit of becoming a nail in a fight where he'll shell up, kind of get into that fetal position, and just take punishment like he did in the Glover Teixeira fight. And that's something that I definitely worry about. Ryan Spann, training out of Fortis MMA, is going to come in with some momentum. He's 4-1 in the UFC, and it's weird, like, we tried fading him in the Misha Serkinov fight, but then we see Ryan Spann, who's now a technical striker on the feet. What are we about to get from Spann here? It's weird, but I think the biggest knock that Spann has is his Alvey fight, where he just has a huge cardio dump. So the longer this fight goes, the more I lean Anthony Smith. Right. But I do think that we could see Spann have success. 1, being the more powerful striker, and 2, implementing that wrestling game that we know Spann likes to go to.
Yeah, man, this one is a tough one. I think we've come to the conclusion that I think we're probably going to lay off the main event completely. But if you make me pick somebody, I'm going to go with Anthony Smith here. Out of Factory X Muay Thai, you're training with some really good names there, and Lionheart for a reason. That you like to see him be able to come back from these beatings, but at the same time, those beatings are going to add up, and they're going to add up. And sometimes you're going to run into somebody like Spann with ungodly amounts of power, and you're going to get your lights shut out for the first time, So Smith, to me, is going to be one of those guys that when he goes on the decline, he's losing 4 or 5 before the end of his career is over, just due to all that damage he's accumulated.
We're talking about 50 fights at 33 years old.
You're right. And then you talked about all the ones he's finished. There's not many ones that he's lost that have made it to the scorecards either, And then you talked about the fetal position. Jones is beating up on this guy. He talks up, I think, going into the 5th round of the Glover fight, his teeth are falling out. My God. But again, then you watch Aljamain Sterling win the belt, and it is just a newfound respect for Anthony Smith, though, But I almost do always want to kind of note that the run to Jones, he beat Shogun, he beat Rashad Evans, and then the Ozdemir, he didn't Homer Simpson it as much as he did the Gus one, but he's definitely behind on the scorecards before he gets the the victory there. And he skipped a bulk of that division. And when you see him having to fight the elite of that division in Rakic and Glover, it's not going to go well for him. But I don't think Ryan Spann has yet to prove to me that he is championship worthy, and Glover, who's got the next shot, and Rakic probably with the next shot after that. Anthony Smith needs to do what he did in the Crook fight. Stay on the outside, use that jab, use that leg kick, try to draw this fight out, maybe even mix in some wrestling of your own. But with Ryan Spann, when you watch that Jim Crook fight, man, Ryan Spann better come in here with some calf kicks in the game plan, because Jim Crook was tearing that lead leg of Lionheart up badly. And Spann, like I said, he's always got that big power, and you look... he's got a nice little guillotine that he's finished a couple people with. I know the Contender Series one was Emiliano Sordi, who has won $1 million at PFL already, so a little bit of blessing in disguise for Sordi there. But Spann he's improving is what I'm kind of saying. We've seen him submit people. We've seen him knock out people. But when I watch him do the Sam Alvey, and then I watch him drop Johnny Walker twice and then shoot for the takedowns, there was immaturity there of him. And I think that was one of the big reasons I wanted to play Misha Serkinov. But what's he do in that one? Shows much more maturity. Drops Misha Serkinov, goes to the mat, he gets right back up. He says, I'm not staying on the mat. I'm not making these mistakes. I'm not doing for the lazy takedowns anymore. He lets Misha back up, and the TKO comes a couple minutes later. So Spann's maturing. Spann's getting better. I think we're going to see the best Anthony Smith that we've already seen, So, yeah, I'm in the business of making picks, so it's going to go with Anthony Smith. But going to be a no bet here probably.
Yeah, so here's something else to say, to throw out there. Anthony Smith is really good against guys that he has a size advantage over. That's Jimmy Crute and Devin Clark in the light heavyweight division. Ryan Spann here matches him in size, and like you said, he's improving every single fight. And in that last fight against Misha Serkinov, he is working that jab. He's using that 79-inch reach, double pumping the jab and everything. And so if he does find some success on the feet, like you said, maybe Anthony Smith does try and find his way to the ground. I think that that's going to be a little bit more difficult than Smith is expecting, especially if Ryan Spann uses that maturity and doesn't follow him to the ground, because that is where Anthony Smith is going to find a lot of his success. If he can't on the feet, he's going to try and pull off a submission victory. Ryan Spann, he's just kind of one of those guys who, I understand he's 4-1 in the UFC, but he hasn't really earned my trust. And again, I think it's that Sam Alvey fight that we can pin that on. So yeah, I'm with you. I think Anthony Smith is the side. If the odds were flipped, I'd be taking Smith here. But at this point, I'm totally happy with laying off of this main event right here.
I'm with you, man, as well. That concludes the 15 fights for us to break down. As real quickly, we're going to go through, give you our fighter, fight, best bet, all that kind of stuff, man. So if you had to pick a fight of the night that stands out amongst all the others, what's it going to be?
I'll go with the co-main event in Kutelaba versus Devin Clark. I think I know for 5 minutes we're going to get a hell of a fight.
Right.
So I think that one's going to be a banger. How about yourself?
It's not as an exciting, I guess, as a Kutelaba fight, but Impa and Carlston Harris, man, way too low on the card. Should most definitely be much higher. But man, I think you got two really good prospects right there, both who have potential to just go upwards, and a fight that I'm just really interested because a lot of money's coming in on Carlston Harris. I'm kind of on the Impa side, and as I'll maybe wait a little bit longer, I might get Impa plus money.
Right.
There's a fighter on the whole card stands out to you.
It's gonna have to be Arman Tsarukyan, and it's more just because you get a minus 800. Show me that you're worth it.
Right.
Prove to me that you deserve to be in that spot. And I get that he's had a couple of really good performances against really good guys. But like I said, it might be a little bit too early in his career to be getting Amanda Nunes type numbers.
Right. So, going against, I guess, my pick here, because I'm going to side with Lionheart, but my fighter to watch is going to be Ryan Spann. I talked about the maturity, the difference in maturity in that Johnny Walker fight versus the Mika Serkinov fight. Trains out of a great gym. I think at 30 years old, Spann is really coming into his own right now, and he's getting big test, first real big test of his career, and there's a lot on the line. Only going up for him if he wins on Saturday, man. For an underdog, I'm gonna go ahead and snag Arroyo there. Not so much that I think he wins this fight, but he's never been knocked out. And stylistically, if this fight stays at range, he is much closer to a pick 'em than he is a plus 200 dog.
We can just agree that line does not make sense.
Absolutely, man.
I think my underdog, it's going to have to be what we got the casual cap on. It is damn near pick'ems,
Right.
but technically Rodriguez is an underdog, and I think with his physical advantages, he could really give Nchukwi some trouble.
I don't hate it one bit, man. You're getting the bigger guy, real light heavyweight at plus money. I think it's honestly a pretty good bet on your side. The best bet for me, I'm going to go with Tony Gravely. I'm going to steal it. We already released it. Minus 165. We're beating the line by a bunch, and we just think that is just stylistic heaven for him to just, land some takedowns, mount up that ride control, and probably take an easy 30-27 victory over Manis.
I could look like a fool coming into next week, but I think I'm going to lean with Raquel Pennington as my best bet of the night. I think she's got all the tools, and she's at least got a history of showing me that she can implement that game plan. Pannie Kianzad just hasn't beaten the level of competition, hasn't shown me that she's dominant in any fashion in her wins. So I'm gonna say Raquel Pennington.
I don't hate it, and she's probably going to be on the betting card come Saturday. Yeah, man, she's the vet. She's got the grindy style, the takedowns. I think it's going to cause Pannie some trouble too.
I love it.
So I appreciate you guys tuning in, staying with us for all 15 fights. Let us know in the comments who you have in the co-main event and the main event. Appreciate you tuning in.
Peace.